Thank you for joining Beyond the Workbench, a podcast where Odin Clack and Michael Magnus discuss life, business, and how to help entrepreneurs grow and innovate.
It's great to see you this evening and excited to catch up with our friend Justin.
This is one that we've been talking about for a while. Ever since we probably left Sheridan, we talked about one podcast and then certain guests, people we had met along the way and talked to and followed, whatever. And so this one has been a long time coming for sure.
Justin Fitzwater has Fitzwater Leather and does a lot of things specifically in kind of the firefighter space. So probably going to butcher all of these labels, but, badges and slings and all kinds of different plaques and things like that.
We call it the fire service related stuff.
Fire service related stuff. And so is really great at what he does, has some very unique methods that he uses for his art, and also really kind of appeals to a unique entry point to the industry that I think is great. A lot of people discover Leathercraft because of Western floral or different things like that. However, there is a shocking number of people in the fire service who get into leather work for various reasons, but often they have some time and some flexibility in their schedule. And so I think he does a really great job, not only making just some great art, some great leather work, but also advocating for leather work in the fire space. So excited to welcome him to the show.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Well, how are you doing this evening? We're glad to have you.
Good. I'm great. I'm very happy to be here. Life is good. It was a long day in the shop. I'm ready to talk.
So today wasn't a service day. Today you've been in the shop all day?
Yeah, all day long. Yep.
You kind of follow a schedule when you're in the shop, or you just kind of depends on what else is going on?
We are very regimented. My wife does a really good job at making sure that I stay on pace. We usually joke around and say that we should put one of those like prison door food slots on the door down here in the basement because I work from home, so she can slide some food in.
An interesting thing that I want to point out is that you work from home. You have a home workshop, but you also have people that do work for you. You have a growing team of contractors, all of them other firemen. How does that kind of work out as far as having a workshop in the home that other people come to?
One of them is a fireman at a neighboring fire department at Snai Valley Fire Protection. He's a firefighter paramedic. Met him through the industry, and we've become quick friends. So that feels pretty comfortable. The other one is not a firefighter, but I've known him for 10, 12 years. His name's Jamie, and he's a whiz. He helps me with painting on some of the larger projects or bulk orders. As of lately, as we've been working on getting into the education scene of things, he's helped me be able to like bounce off techniques and teach somebody that has a foundational painting background. He used to do caricatures at the amusement park near our house here in Kansas City, Worlds of Fun. He was like the lead of all that. So being able to teach him has helped a lot. So anyways, not to ramble, but I got two guys and I've known one of them for a long time, so it doesn't feel weird. He's been in my house several times. And the other one, we just click and are fast friends. So usually somebody's here, it doesn't feel weird or anything. I'm never afraid they're going to walk off with any of the stuff or, steal the secret recipe or something.
Are they working shift even when you're at the firehouse?
Yeah, sometimes if we're in a pinch. Jamie's been here and painted, and that's a wild experience. Being a new business and formerly just a one-man team, it's been weird to just be sitting at the fire station or whatever and receive a text message with exactly what I had in mind finished, and he nails it to a T. It's like, man, I mean, people wouldn't be able to tell whether it's me or him, so it's perfect.
Talk to us a little bit about what that growth looked like. When did you start bringing other people into the business? How did you justify that expense? What was the tipping point where you saw not only your growth, but your growth potential that you started not even outsourcing, but insourcing, I guess, some of that work?
So I was pulling like 12-hour days every day I'm in the shop. I mean, I live here, so it's not hard to pull excruciating hours in the shop. And I'd been through several Christmases where it was unreal, and I'm working all the way up till Christmas Day. And being as the fire department's like a whole big family, guys will order something for their captain last minute, and I'm like, yeah, it's fine, and I'll throw them a bone and I'll get it done for them. And I was working all the way up till the holidays. That was a big sign there. Was I was like, I'm killing myself through the holiday season. I mean, to be frank, I'm not watching my babies grow if I'm down here. I got 3 kids. So they're living their lives just on the other side of a door. And I'm down here the whole time. I'm only not even coming up for dinner. I'm coming up after dinner's all done. My daughter's in bed. The boys are doing their thing. And it's like, okay, that'll kind of hit you in the soft spot. I guess logistically speaking, yeah, it just turned into when there was more work than I felt like I had time in the day for, my wife is my business partner through and through. Her name's on the business. It's a legitimate business partnership.
Mhm.
When we sit down and we're like, I mean, we got to fix something, because I'm only talking to you like a business partner and I'm not even really a part of the kids' lives. So we got to find a way to structure this thing out a little different. And when you're hiring friends too, that can get sticky. But it also, with us, it seems to work great and it doesn't feel necessarily like a boss relationship kind of thing.
I remember going through that learning curve, myself, and similar to you, I worked out of my house and attached but detached garage. You have to like walk through the house and things like that. And even she's like, even the guys need to go to the bathroom and things like that late at night and all these different things. It was a challenge to kind of work through, but luckily I had good guys. But there was a moment where I remember when I finally asked someone to help me out in the workshop. And it clicked to me like, oh yeah, this is actually worth having someone around. It's like having two people out here, right? People's like, well, of course it's two people out there because there's another person. But no, I had to go through that process in my head and realize, that was well worth whatever I was paying him to be there with me because we got twice as much done. Or he was doing this and I was doing that. I mean, these are things I would have all done on my own. Do you remember for you when it finally clicked for you and you're like, hey, yeah, this is really the way we should go and bringing in help?
Our first employee, Kyle, that we hired on, he had been doing leather work on his own. He was doing his own thing. He does a lot of saddle tack stuff. He gives our business cowboy credibility. I mean, he runs a chuck wagon. He is a farrier on the side and shoes horses. He's also a PRN at the hospital, and he's a firefighter. I mean, the guy does 1,000 things. So I can't speak highly enough about him. But he's my guy that does all my finishing stuff, and that was like, okay, what can I sacrifice on? What can I take my hands out of? To an extent, what do I not like to do? And what's somebody willing to do? Kyle does sewing and stitching and put things together. Our new radio straps and radio holsters that we're making are almost entirely made by him, aside from carving. That was from a business perspective. But even then, there's still a learning curve. Jamie has certain days he can come in. Kyle has certain days he can come in. Me and Kyle both work fire department shifts. I can't even remember what his shift schedule is. He'll listen to this and probably be kicking me sitting next to me while we're listening. But mine's 24/48, so it shifts around all the time. So it's trying to gather. Okay, I do the carving, then it goes to the paint bench. Is Jamie available on these days to get things painted? Sometimes Kyle is available before Jamie is. And so then Kyle's like, what do you need me to do? And then I got to like quickly paint a few things to get them over to Kyle. So hopefully that answers your question that it's what made me realize kind of that this was the antidote. I think I'm still working on it. Like it helps. It seems to be that we go on a really quick pace and everything's moving like a well-oiled machine. And then I got to pick up a shift or Kyle's shifts and mine don't align. And Jamie is a fantastic musician in a band that is touring. I mean, they go on tours and they record Friendly Thieves to give them a shout out. Great music. He's got his things he's got to do. I guess in a way, it is the antidote, but we all are still down here trying to figure out how we can get that perfectly well-oiled machine. It seems like usually there's a piston that misfires every now and again, and then it's like somebody's got to eat it real quick. That's where we're still learning on how to do this thing. In fact, just to say one more thing, Jamie has a job because of you guys. Because when we took that class in Sheridan, I remember it like yesterday. Odin, you looked me dead in my eyes and were like, "You need to hire people and pay them well. They will help you through and through." And I was like, "Damn, all right. I guess time to hire another guy because me and Kyle are eating it down here, and we need another person." So that's kind of the rule: is we won't hire another person until we're all miserable, and then we'll hire another person.
I do want to touch on that because I think there's a piece to this story that hasn't come up yet that I think is important. And that is, so we did originally meet all together when you took one of our business classes in Sheridan. You and your wife took it together. And I very distinctly remember a lot of the conversation had to do with not what you needed today, but what you needed to get to where you wanted to be in 2 years. Whether you have that vision or she has that vision or you guys collectively have that vision, that really stood out to me as it wasn't just what do I need to get through the day? What do I need to get through the season? It was looking at to be able to do this at the scale that we want to be able to make this do what we would like it to do for our family. What does it take to get there? And I thought that was great because there's not a lot of people, I don't say not a lot of people, but not everybody quite has that clarity of where they're trying to get to. And so a lot of the decisions made along the way are almost reactionary. I'm prone to that myself. It's what sounds good today. So being able to have that vision and knowing that hiring people was part of getting to the production level to make this reach your goals, I thought it is probably an important part of some of that hiring decision too.
Yeah, I mean, call it divine intuition or whatever. I mean, this is like our little spiritual place here. So it's whatever feels right. And I don't know. I feel like we're working a creative field. We got to be intuitive individuals, and it was more of a semi-guided intuitive decision to hire people because you kind of know in your gut like what is going to be the right decision to make. Some decisions are harder than others, but in our guts we knew that like we got to get some people in here. I mean, it don't beef it up too much. It's kind of a no brainer. If you got too much work for one person, bring more people in, right? But at the same time, it didn't seem so scary because it's like in your gut, you know that this is what's going to be the ticket to providing more.
I've been following you for quite a while, right? I've always, I was wild when I met you. I was like, oh man, I love your work. Your painting, everything is really cool. And we can talk about how you've helped me along the way, really over the last year or so with some little tips and tricks. But, you know, in meeting you, face to face and talking about your business, I do think we should give you even more credit because you had a more solid vision about where you guys wanted to go than so many other people we meet. Everyone else is in business, right? When we meeting, I make something, I sell it, I make money. I'm in business. Okay. Not everyone has a plan and vision for where they want the business to end up. I mean, I certainly didn't. I was winging it like, I don't know. Let's see what happens at the end of this year. We'll reevaluate, right? When we met you in Sheridan, this is what we want in X period of time and what it means. That's not the norm, right? I think most of us, me included, kind of fall into that vision, fall into that space, but it's not like the clarity you guys had. And I know it seems like, talking to you, you don't necessarily think it's all that clear, but you're far more clear than most people. And I think that helps when you have to make those big decisions about hiring people, right? It's not like a whim. It's not just a, emotional decision. It's, well, no, I measured it against our goals, where we want to end up. And that's everything lines up that way because this is what's required to get us to the goal. And I don't think that should be overlooked. And if I have to encourage anyone, I really tell people when our business class is really about this: who are you? What do you want to be when you grow up? Type stuff, right? And then let's start building a plan around that. If you change the plan or you change the vision as you go, fine, no problem. But at least have a point on the horizon you're pointing to, so you're not wasting a lot of time. That's a lot of what we're saying. You guys had already had that, and I don't want to lose that in discussion. I think it's something to be admired and pat you on the back for.
Man, that that means a lot. Thank you. I'd like to think that there's like a big, totally fleshed out strategy behind it, but I really think that when you just, I don't know, you just establish goals and meet them at the simplest level, even if those goals are lofty. I mean, yeah, you can do the, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, you can do your SMART goals, you can do those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Sometimes I get lost in the jargon and I'm like, man, whatever. What is it that we want to do? What do you want to see things at the end? I mean, I feel like if you don't have some sort of end goal result, then you're just spinning your wheels. And even if it's something that you absolutely love, I mean, I love this craft through and through. I mean, it was like the Big Bang when I first discovered my first video on YouTube. I was like, oh my God, I think I can do that, with an art background of my own. And then it just exploded from there and I couldn't get enough of it. It was like just enough challenge to keep me engaged, but then just enough ease of picking it up. I mean, if you just play with the tools, it seems so simple. If you just play with the tools and experiment, you'll find things that work. And that was addicting, learning the craft. Once you know the way, you see it in all things. So it's like now I'm able to continue to like build upon that. And then it's like, okay, well, now that we know how to do this, I like to think we're pretty decent at it. How far do we want to go with it? Full time is a goal. That is, if you have a side job, or in my case, I have like a career next to a career kind of thing. I want to go full time doing leather work. So you got to, what will bring us there and then fill in the gaps.
I think something too that's a piece of the puzzle, and we talk about this sometime, Odin, with you and your wife, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a spouse, but if you look at a lot of the really successful businesses in history, you have a visionary and an implementer. I do think that that is something that is important to highlight, is that even with that kind of big picture idea, that creative vision, you really do kind of need that partner, often in this case a spouse, who can hold your feet to the fire and hold you accountable, because that is one of the other things that, and it doesn't have to be a spouse, maybe it's just a friend who, I mean, Odin and I sometimes I do that for each other. You know, it's we'll have an idea, but we'll hold each other accountable for that. Having that accountability, particularly for creative people, I think is really, really important. And that's you guys partner very well. So I think that's great.
Oftentimes it is a spouse for some of us because we are hermits, right? We if without our spouses, we stay in our caves. And the only person crazy enough to get outside our caves are our spouses, right? So they become our kind of de facto, accountability partner because no one else is going to see us if not for them. But you're right; it doesn't have to be a spouse. It could just be a partner. It could be you and I talk all the time. We about that. We've met your wife. She definitely has a sense of a hold about the business and her role and where you guys are going, and obviously influences those things. Some people, their wives, partners, or whatever, are no more than, hey, are you spending too much money, not making enough money, that type of thing. But yours is different. I mean, I would like to ask you, tell us a little more about her role and how you guys have kind of grown together to know who's doing what in the business and how she pushes you and how you push her and how you tell us more about that relationship, as a wife/business partner.
He's really looking for advice.
Oh no, no. So
We'll cut that out. No, I'm joking.
no way. So me and my wife owned a t-shirt printing business as our first business together while we were dating. And then when we got married, we were still doing that. I always knew as an individual that I wanted to make money being creative. I knew that like the key to my happiness with all of the, the biggest fish net I could throw out there was I just want to make money and be creative at the same time. And I don't know how this is going to work out, but eventually I'll stumble upon something. And then I became a firefighter. My dad was a firefighter. My uncle was a firefighter. My grandpa was a firefighter, and my grandpa's cousin was a battalion chief firefighter, all for Kansas City Fire Department. So I joined the family business and then saw guys wearing these shields. And there was a guy by the name of Brian Pirtle who was making the shields on the front of the helmets, and he was fantastic at it. He does very select jobs now. He's kind of slowed down his business to where he will do them for friends and that kind of thing. But I saw him doing that, not to make a long story too long, but that's when I stumbled upon a YouTube video on leatherwork. I ran it as just a hobby. I ran my own books, Monday call days, where if I saw somebody at a working house fire, we're sweaty, we're standing outside the fire, and he's like, "Hey man, I hear you make shields." Yeah, I do. Yeah, I think I'd like one of those. Okay, sounds good. And I remember that. I'd write it down in a book and then I'd call him on Monday and say, "Were you serious?" Because I remember when we were off, off the avenue fighting a fire, you wanted that. And they're like, "Yeah, sure, go ahead and put me down." And then it was my wife's idea when I was running as a hobby. Her first involvement was she said, "You got to take money up front," because I was doing all these guys. I mean, we're all buddies, and then you're also dealing with kind of like the interpersonal politics on the fire department, and like this guy's been working for 25 years. I don't want to piss him off, so I'm gonna make it, and hopefully he pays me. And she's like, "No, screw that. You need to take money up front." And that was kind of her first involvement, but it was still a hobby. Eventually, it turned into a business without any of us knowing it and me kind of knowing it. I was always kind of pushing that. That's what motivates you is like, hey, I can actually do something here. And then she jumped on board. She was like, I'm seeing that you have a need for a type A personality. And I'm a lofty, I'm creative. So I'm like, we're gonna change the industry and we're gonna, like all this different stuff's running through my head. And she comes in and she's like, hey, how about we like, price this stuff out? Let's get a website. Let's I'll take orders for you. I will do all the communications. Her involvement was that everything that I'm weak on, ironically enough, just in our marriage, everything I suck at, she's really good at. And then everything I'm really good at, she's also really good at. So it works out perfect. It's funny because she gets called bro, dude, what's up, brother? Because people think they're talking to me. So she, thanks, man. I really appreciate it. She's like, no problem. Yeah, so that's what she does. She fills that role gladly. And it's a thankless role. I mean, if you really think about it, people think they're talking to me half the time. So it's like she doesn't even get, we're trying to find ways to work her in. We've been talking about this. Like, how can we throw you in on some posts? Like, we need to get you like boxing up some stuff or, sitting on the computer, something to like show people who you are. Cause this business is equally 50% her. So I don't know. She bought in that just one day it just clicked. It's like, what do we want to do? I want you home was her big thing. I want you home. I'm tired of seeing you wake up at 5:30 in the morning, head to work, be gone for 24 hours, come home, a lot of times it's 7:30 the next day. I'm ready to have you home. And what do? to get you there. We seem to be having some success in the leather shop. Let's do it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's all. I mean, I think it's really awesome because I mean, I don't think my wife will mind me saying this, but she wasn't opposed to me running the business, but it was me doing my thing. She wasn't fully involved yet. I mean, I was having a conversation with someone earlier this week about how I was ask my wife questions about certain designs, and she would tell me what she would like. I'm like, yeah, well, you ain't really the real my target audience. So your opinion is, you know. Now she understands where the brand is and where it's going and all things like that. You know, but it took a while to get it to get her there. And I know some people never happens, right? It's always a bit of obstacle. It's always I support you, but I'm not really. It's really your thing. And those of us that have business partners or spouses who are involved like that or support the visions, I think that is something that we should be very happy with. I mean, something to be proud of. I mean, I'm sure it's not always rainbows and unicorns, working with your spouse, but neither is it working with a business partner, right? I mean, or any employee, right? Type of thing. So but it's a beautiful thing when everyone's on the same page and I think in our phase where we're trying to make that more crystallized, like we're trying to document it more so we can go back to like, hey, this is what we decided together. It wasn't like just a passing thing and a random conversation by the sink. It was no, we had a conversation, we talked about this is a plan, the plan needs to change, the business partners, i.e. she and I, are going to talk about it again and get out of this, hey, we're just happy to be in the space together thing, and now it's into, okay, let's fully like leverage us being in the same space together and turn to something that's going to help us grow. That's the next phase for my wife and I.
So let me ask you a question that kind of piggybacks off that a little bit, because you not only work with your wife, you also work with people that are friends, right? And which is great to enjoy all the people that you work with. But I do also want to ask, like, it's never perfect, right? And so how do you navigate conflict with people that you employ that you kind of have to be the boss sometimes, but there's also that kind of layer to it that you don't want to upset your friend. Do you have any advice or any kind of anecdotes or stories of things that you've kind of run into that situation, and how did you navigate it?
That's actually hilarious because we just had a situation a few days ago that's been kind of a running joke ever since. With Kyle being also in the fire service, when you make a mistake in the fire service, generally speaking, it's predominantly male and very forward to use things kindly. Usually the words aren't so kind. You're usually called a dummy pretty quickly. And so that straightforward correction, slightly tongue in cheek, but seriously though, like kind of correction stuff is what me that's the language me and him speak. To be honest, Jamie hasn't made a mistake. He's been right on the money, and if there were things that needed correcting, he is a very understanding, very flexible, very peaceful human being in the shop. He's very quiet, intentional with his words, and we've had multiple conversations where it's like, I don't ever want to make you feel uncomfortable. He was like, dude, it's your name that's going on it. Like, if you don't like something, then we'll fix it. Okay, perfect. Being as me and Jamie have a lot of creative conversations, there's room for greater dialogue there. So that one's kind of unique. There is a lot of talking before we do something, and our expectations are set clear before that even happens. And an invested, for lack of a better term, competent employee will hear you the first time with that kind of conversation because it's drawn up, reduced down, nailed up, pulled down several different times before he actually sits down and does it. Kind of beat a dead horse with that. But with Kyle, for example, Kyle, his new nickname in the shop is Mitts. Because every single thing Kyle touches gets a damn fingerprint on it. And it's like, dude, what are you doing? Wash your hands. I mean, we make white shields. The whole thing is painted white meticulously, whether it's by me or by Jamie, at least two coats most of the time. In between all these cuts and tooling. I mean, we're working with 6.5 inches by 7 inches or whatever, and it's all packed in there. And then it goes to Kyle, the finishing final man, and he's got a vice grip on this thing right in the middle of it, and it's his thumbprint. And so I kept hammering him. He's like, all right, screw it. I'm wearing gloves. I'm like, I think that's actually worse because then you don't have that tactile response when you feel your hands are sticky. Every shield, there was like a series of 5 that I went over to our little photo booth and just gave it a real quick look, nonchalantly. And I'd be like, yep. He's like, what? And he rolls over and looks at me. And I'm like, yeah, dude, you did it again. He's like, no way. And so now every one that he does perfectly, he makes sure to tell me and present it and is very like, what do you think about this? And is like kind of upset about it. kind of like it serves you right. So I was able, yeah. So I guess in a way, the correction there was to really bust his balls. And you got dirty hands, dude. You need to go wash your hands.
You got to create one of those signs on the wall, like X amount of days since the last time we put a fingerprint on something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. If that was the case, we would be at zero right now because of course, his last, I give him credit. I'll give him credit. His last shield he made, he did a great job. It was a white shield, and he didn't put a single fingerprint on it once. But when you're mixing black and white, like black dye, black edge dye on a white front shield, we paint with that edge coat white. Stays kind of tacky for a while, and that's all it takes. But yeah,
Your work is really good, but and I've tried to emulate some of the stuff you've done. So to be fair to your guy, it is far more difficult than like your videos make it seem. Because I've tried to do some of the stuff you do. It is not easy, man. It's so I'm sure if I was around you, I'd be Kyle. I'd be the one with fingerprints all over crap too. So I totally get that.
So there's something really interesting that has come up in some conversations when hanging out, not just with you, but with some of your guys in Waco. And hoping you could talk a little bit about it, but a little bit of a controversial piece here: the history of leather associated with the fire department predates leather associated with cowboy culture. Can you tell me a little bit about that history of how early America used leather in fire departments and how that's kind of been a part of the culture ever since?
it is a controversial statement, is it not?
Let's get
Um,
into it. Let's do it.
Yeah, depending on who you ask. So I did some research after Kyle was the first person to say that, and Kyle being a farrier and does saddle tack and by all accounts a cowboy, other than rustling cattle in his spare time, very invested in Western culture. He was the first person to say that. This whole conversation got started between me and Kyle because there's a clear and apparent need for more involvement of the fire service leather community in the greater leathercraft community as a whole. When I did my submitted my carving in Sheridan and made, for lack of a better term, like a pilgrimage, I was like, I'm going to go there and show a fire service piece because I have a feeling there's going to be a lot of Western floral and horses and stuff like that, and I want to make something that's like quintessential fire department and just see what happens and how it goes. At the very minimum, people are going to at least stop and look at it, and that's all I'm asking for. So the goal that we setting goals was to bridge the gap because there is a gap. You go to Waco, go to Sheridan, we're going to go to Prescott. So I'm curious, but I have a feeling it's probably going to be around about the same crowd. And that crowd is wonderful and welcoming, and I love everything about it. I am not a cowboy. I I own one pair of boots. I'm from Kansas City, Cowtown, USA. So I got a little bit of a draw. I know who I am, but I am not that, and I'd like to see more of the fire service guys come into the equation. Anyways, that was kind of the backstory on where this conversation came up between me and Kyle, and thus to you, Magnus, when we were having that conversation at the restaurant. Then it got me thinking, okay, well, if we're going to be spewing this information, we better better make sure we're right. And turns out, depending on who you ask, and I'm sure there's somebody that's probably a greater expert on the Western side of things than I am, but I have some notes here on the side saying that the Western saddle emerged in the US in Texas between the 1840s and 1850s. So, like Western cowboys coming from vaqueros, all their traditions between the 1840s and 1850s. The first leather fire helmet was made Jacobus Turk in New York City in the 1730s. And it was like it had your traditional crown, like you would picture on a fire helmet, with four combs and a really wide brim. I mean, almost kind of looked like an Amish hat. And that was what was kind of played with during that time. But then come the 1830s, 1821 to 1836 is what I have. That's when the Henry T. Gratacap fire helmet was invented. And then that's what you picture today as being like the leather fire helmet. If you make that direct comparison, I mean, we can go back even further than that. And sure, you can go back to like saddlery as a trade, go overseas and go like BCE times on when leather was used for on horses and stuff. And you can go back to like the 1600s with leather fire hose, certain pieces of equipment. When we're talking American history, because I would say, the European saddles and European stuff isn't exactly what Western floral is about. Strictly American history, it kind of makes sense. I mean, what was settled first? The East in America, right? Fire departments emerge first on the east, and then being New York City, and that's where all the innovation's happening. And so you go east to west. If we're talking Western culture, then Western stuff would have came after Eastern stuff, just with how our country was brought forth. So those are kind of the hard dates on that. The particular source would tell you that Western floral and saddles and stuff came between the 1840s and 1850s, and the Henry T. Graticat was 1830s. So we got you beat.
When we go to these, at least the leather shows that we go to, we attend, it is that group, toolers and just Sheridan floral carving, things like that. But I think there's an opportunity to remind everyone involved in leathercraft that leathercraft is bigger than just your individual niche. You have fire service stuff, right? I'm doing Don Gonzalez kind of. I like the term personally. He called myself Uptown, right? I'll go with that, right? It's fine with me. It sounds good. Then you got guys who are doing sneakers, right? And you got guys that are doing that European styles, or Nigel Armitage who are doing casework, and all these little niches.
And beyond that, you have people who are doing costumes, the cosplay scene. You have people who are doing the reenactment with the armor, or just people doing art for art's sake. A lot of the figure carving, a lot of those type of things too. So there's so.
Magnus, the armor one itself is a really interesting one because armor itself has been around for how long?
What are the dates on that one, Justin?
Yeah, I mean, come on. So
The earliest, most prominent one I could think of would be samurai. I mean, it doesn't get much older than some of those Eastern dynasties,
yeah, yeah,
and
absolutely.
and that would have been their choice is hardened leather.
It's hard for anyone to claim ownership, have a complete monopoly on leading the leathercraft space completely, right? Maybe in your one little area, one little niche, right? But we're all contributing. I think there's an opportunity. I mean, no matter what you do, I think there's an opportunity for all of us to appreciate, study, understand. I made sneakers once, right? I don't really wear sneakers. I totally enjoyed making the pair of sneakers. They came out great. People always offer to buy them here all the time. I won't sell them because it's the only pair I'll ever make, right? But I learned a lot. It's still leather work. It's just not the leather work I do day to day. But some of the things I learned in doing that thing, I carry with me into the work that I do today. If I sit with you, which I've sat with you vicariously through your YouTube videos and Instagram, things like that, I'm always watching, studying what you're doing, right? I'm taking some of the things that you're doing in your videos and I'm trying to apply to my work here with painting and things like that. I mean, it's just leather. It's leather. I mean, the whole thing that we love is working with our hands and working and being creative with the material. It doesn't have to mean that we can only appreciate that one thing that we do.
That's one of the reasons that I love something that you mentioned earlier when we kind of first got started is that, when you look at a lot of the opportunities for people to enter the leathercraft industry, far and away, it's doing a Western floral design with the Basic 7 because it's a great learning opportunity. Tandy really mastered how to help people learn that when in the heydays in the 50s and 60s and 70s. But that is not necessarily where everybody wants to enter into the industry. That's not necessarily the project they would want to start with or that appeals to them. And it may be something like a little pouch for a costume, or in your case, what you were talking about, looking at those opportunities to help people make functional items that they'll actually use. And I think that is a huge piece of kind of the future growth of the industry, not forgetting those really important foundational pieces, but also kind of meeting people where they are. We've had several guests where we talked to them and they said, well, I started with woodwork and then I got into leather. And it's like, okay, well, that's great. We need more opportunities to bridge that gap, right? And so I love what you guys are doing, and not only showing how you can do art, you do some really incredible stuff, but also being able to teach and introduce people in the fire service to the leatherworking community. I think that's awesome.
Thanks. Yeah. I think that if you own a leathercraft business and you'll hear a lot of the people, I mean, I'm still a student and studying. It's almost like leathercraft is more of a practice than it is anything else. You hear the people that have been doing it for a long time that tell you that they're still picking things up or still learning something. I think that if you own a leathercraft business, you would want expansion. You would want to expand the industry because A, that means you have more to learn, but B, that's selfishly, that's another potential customer that just joined in. Whether you're hustling the education side or you're hustling a product, the more that we educate people on this topic, it kind of goes back to the how many people have you had sat down as a leather craftsman and had a conversation with that really felt like their belt was a damn good belt, and then to flip it over and see that genuine leather on the back, and you're like, that's going to fall apart in the next year, guaranteed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then they're coming back, I'm sure, to you, Odin, and they're buying one of your fantastic belts, because they're like, man, he was right.
Yep.
Whatever it may be. I've done that education all the time. The first big gig we had where we were selling our leather koozies was with a local brewery, and they allowed us to set up a table while they showcased a new beer that they were brewing and selling. And we set up a table, and I didn't sell really anything, maybe a couple of silly little keychains or whatever, but I was mostly there with diagrams on what is full grain leather, what's the top of the grain look like, what's the flesh look like, where where does this stack up with leather quality? It was mostly there to say, hey, when you buy a leather item from me, you're buying a eco-friendly item because we use vegetable tan leather. You're buying the most durable possible item when it comes to leather items, and you're supporting a local business, a small business, rather than supporting. I don't think Wrangler needs any more money. I think they're probably doing fine.
Yeah.
Like if you don't buy their belt, that's not a problem. But if you buy my belt, you're helping me a lot. So it's like the education side of things was what we kind of focused on with that when we went to our first show, I guess you could say. First time I ever set up a table. I had very few products. I had mostly pieces of paper that said, hey, the belt you're wearing is trash. Buy one from us. And it worked out pretty well. But you'd be surprised at how many people don't understand that. So when we're talking about expansion, we're talking about growing the industry as a whole. It's more than just who did it first. I mean, it's fun. It's healthy banter. I think it's worth having that. I'm a competitive person, so it's fun to be kind of competitive and be like, well, we got you there. But it's more just standing at the pulpit and advocating for more room for not just the fire service, but other industries as a whole. Let's not forget.
As a small business owner, as a crafter, I'm going to advocate. I'll stand at the pulpit with you, but I'm going to advocate for diversity of thought.
Yeah.
I love going to these events. I appreciate the tooling. I love it. It's beautiful. There's so much there to appreciate, but I absolutely love seeing folks that don't do anything with it. They don't touch it. They don't understand it. They don't buy tools. They don't care. They're there to do mass. They're there to do armor. They're there. There's a gentleman who does armor. He stops out here all the time. You will never catch me in a suit of armor. I have no interest in it at all. But man, I love seeing this guy work, right? It is just beautiful, his process, but he cares nothing about Western tooling and saddles. I think that's cool. I think we all need to be in the same place. We all need to be advocating for each other, either as crafters, as artists, but even as small as business people. When you say shop American, shop small, shop locally, no matter what you're selling, I'm benefiting from that. You're benefiting from it. So that's diversity of thought, diversity of approach. I think is paramount. It's important for all of us, however you want to look at it. So I love seeing you and so many others at these events, and I hope that people like you will continue to invite other folks, whether it be in fire service or just a different type of leather art.
I think that's how we elevate the craft too, right? You get these people who come from art backgrounds who join leatherwork, and all of a sudden the bar is raised. And even with the Western tooling, as soon as the Western tooling got over to Japan and Vietnam, and those guys had do such precision work, it raised the bar for everybody here who's been doing it for a long time. And so I do think that that's another piece of the puzzle that's really important, is that everybody who joins the industry from some different perspective, they bring all of their experience, they bring all of their design ideas, and they come up with things that nobody's ever come up with before and challenge the status quo. And that's the only way that things get better. And I actually want to transition that into another question for you, Justin, because you do a very interesting style of painting. Everybody I know, I remember when I was introducing you to some folks in Sheridan, and Annie Libertini, who is known for her painting, was like, how do you get your paint so smooth? It was a very cool moment to watch. But I think that's a legitimate question. How do you get your paint so smooth? And how did you figure out the technique that you use for color, kind of centralizing this idea of innovation and mixing things up and bringing new ideas? I guess for those who are unfamiliar, tell a little bit about what it is that you do and what the discovery process was like for coming up with something that seems obvious in a lot of ways, but also is nothing that I've seen anybody else do.
Make fire helmet shields for the front of fire helmets, and then I do my own like standalone carvings, and I do radio straps and holsters, and it all is kind of focused on what will carry the carving. So what we pick is almost kind of structured secondary to the carving itself. What you're going to have you're going to see variancy between these products. One thing that will remain on each product is a bad to the bone carving. So that was what I would liked the most. That was the thing that got me the most fired up. That was the first thing I started doing. With each iteration of the carving, there were certain things that I was noticing that I either didn't like about the end product, was generally dissatisfied with. That's a really cool carving, but I think I could add more detail here. That's a really cool carving, but at the end, it doesn't quite have that life with that saturation that I want or whatever. Tipping the hat back to that previous bit is, if you keep your mind open to all the possibilities and don't put yourself in a box creatively, which talk about counterintuitive, we're creatives and then we're going to put ourselves in a box because these are the rules. That's absolutely off, completely backwards to what I would say is the way that you should do things. Art is supposed to be lawless. You wouldn't have Jackson Pollocks and Andy Warhols if they followed the rules completely perfect to a T, right?
I like that.
So you should break the rules. That's literally what art is. What happens if I decide I don't like seeing brush strokes on my painting? A lot of these are big numbers in the middle of these shields. There's a lot of typeface and text and fonts. It needs to survive in a burning building. So I need to have a lot of paint, but I don't want to have it look all stroke with all these strokes because to me, in my personal taste, I don't like how it looks. When I see somebody's brush strokes, this isn't a canvas to me. It's more like how do I paint like an enamel pin that you would buy and like put on a denim jacket. I want to see it look uniform and like is that made out of leather? I can't tell. That was like what really intrigued me stylistically. So working with these paints enough, and I use pretty much exclusively Angelus paints, the viscosity of them and just getting really nose down deep in it. You're like, I think that would work out better if we just rolled it or spread it on like butter. What tools can we use? Well, I had a ballpoint stylus from Transferring Patterns. That might work perfect. So then I picked it up, I dipped it in the paint, really loaded it heavy and pulled it across my letter and was like, oh man, there we go. And then I found that I can spread that like a tidal wave across my project. And then once all that paint settles down into the leather, it settles almost kind of like bread or a cake. You can jiggle it all over the place, but then eventually it settles down and runs even. And it worked out. And then I also found out from that point that I'm not doing multiple coats. I'm doing one really fat coat. So I'm maximizing my time. That translates to the fire service. So like without running along my brain, and I'm sure most creatives' brains, when you're thinking with that large fish net again, I'm trying to catch as much fish as I can when it comes to ideas, right? I'm not taking anything off the table. My brain is like, okay, so where does this fit for other people? Well, it fits for the fire service leather guys because you could be painting at the fire station. A lot of guys work on their leather projects at the station, and the bells go off right in the middle of what you're doing. You don't got to sit there and like wash your brush out and then pray to God you got all the paint out, and then you come back from working a fire for 2 hours and come back and now your brush is ruined or whatever. Now you literally just wipe it off on a rag because it's a metal ballpoint stylus and you're off on the call. That applies to my specific industry, but I guess in hopes to answer your question clearly, it was a matter of not putting myself in a box and just thinking, what would I think work to achieve the look that I like best? The end goal is how the product presents itself. And if I don't like it when I have all these brush strokes, especially when it comes to antiquing. If you've ever antique paint before, your brushstrokes are going to carry some antique. Now it looks more rustic than I wanted it to, right? I want my antique to be very intentional. That's something I preach to the guys in the shop all the time is intentionality. Does it look intentional? Even if it wasn't sometimes, does it look intentional? Then that's when we're given the look we want. So it was a matter of picking up a tool and saying, I think that this would actually be what I use to paint with. And now I paint pretty much exclusively with a ballpoint stylus of various sizes. When I go to blend, I use little makeup daubers.
You've been kind enough to share with me. I mean, I've reached out to you like I don't know 5, 6, 10 times in the last year, asking you questions because I've been trying to paint some of my pieces as well. In fact, I just got through doing this championship tamale belt, and I reached out to you and talked to you about that, talking about some things I'm breaking some rules on. I'll share more on the rule breaking later. But you were amazed. You was like, yeah, I don't use a brush at all. Like, how do you do that? And so easier said than done because I went out searching for these magical tools that you use and no one sells Justin Fitzwater's magical painting styluses, right? It's not like these are things you've put together on your own. You've kind of experimented with, right?
Yeah, I guess I should say that the first thing I didn't pick up was a ballpoint stylus. The first thing I picked up was a dowel rod, and and I actually got some. This could be fun. I don't think we've ever seen a show and tell on your show yet
We'll
before,
do it.
but very first ones I ever made were right here. So they were. Can you see those good?
Those like ends of paintbrushes or something.
These are dowel rods. These are just quarter. This is a quarter-inch dowel rod. You can see how much paint's on it. It almost bubbles out at the tip with
Yeah,
how many times I've used it. I did them in various sizes that I thought I might need. I just sanded them down and rolled it around, and was like, "That's going to be what I paint with now." And I just dip it in the paint, and then I spread it along as needed. That's what I started with. And then I was like, "Well, these are really fat. How do I get one that's really thin? Because I'm not a woodworker at all. So how do I get one that's really fine?" And I made these that are dangerous looking. If you can even see that there.
yeah,
I got those. They're leather sewing needles that I just like bound up and then taped on there. It looked like a prison shank. So when you're doing those fine details, that's where you can dip and just get right in that tiny. Because I'm working with, like I said, like 6.5 by 6.5 inches with all these helmet shields. And guys want the fullest detail possible. I want my fire department logo on a shield. Well, that logo ends up being like 3.5 by 3.5. So now we're looking into the micro carving conversation, which isn't, don't Google it, you ain't gonna find much. What is the smallest swivel knife blade I can buy? How do I get things tiny? Because that's, I got to pack as much detail into this 6.5 by 6.5 as possible. Thus, what is my end result? What do I want my project to look like in my mind? What's it supposed to look like? Okay, I'm going to structure my tools and techniques to meet that vision. It's not about following rules necessarily to meet that vision. It's a matter of making do with what you got. I know Jim Linnell is a big fan of that. He talks a lot about angled blades, and the recent class I took with him, he was like, they didn't have F.O. Baird didn't have fancy knives like that. He had a straight like chisel blade that he just pushed through the leather. The same principle, really. It's kind of time honored tradition to make your own stuff. So then it's like, I just used it with painting is all. That brought me over to the old ballpoint styluses that I picked up on Amazon. There they are there. And now I got various tip sizes and I can work with all that. So these are my tools.
I'm gonna need you to share that Amazon link, sir.
I actually do have it.
Yeah, send it over, man. Because in chasing after this magical technique you have here, I went over to I don't know, Michael's or Hobby Lobby or something, and all I could find was clay working tools,
Hmm.
ballpoint styluses, and I bought a set of I think 5, and only one of the sizes was useful. The other ones are way too big. But it worked great. I painted almost the entire belt that way. I think I've still got some more nuances to work through to get even close to your level, but it was definitely better than using a brush.
Do you want to hear something funny? Do you know who has those same tools? My daughter. They came with her Mariah Elizabeth art set.
There
So,
they are. There it is.
so
Well, yeah,
you can get you can find and innovate with what you got.
exactly.
What's the one tool the weirdest thing in your shop that you've converted into a useful functional tool for you?
I think the most shocking and grotesque looking is the needlepoint painting tool. That's the one that I think on a lot of my reels and Instagram stuff, I think most people ask like, "What are you painting with?" when they see that. Okay, so I think the weirdest tool, these little makeup blenders. I think that's the repurposed weirdest thing. You wouldn't think in a shop full of dudes, firemen and these, that we would be placing an order on Amazon for makeup blenders. I'm telling you, they work when we're blending paint and stuff. Once again, I'm trying to leave my stuff strokeless. I want it to be kind of a puzzle. How did he put that paint on there? How did he do it? I can't even tell what tool was used. And the foam that these things have, that like high density, kind of almost feels like silicone rubbery. It is a sponge, but it's like a high density
Yeah,
sponge.
yeah,
It leaves almost no texture at all. And I feather it out and dry blend with them. So it's all just a basis of technique. What do I want my project to look like? And what tool do I think will do the job? And that kind of stuff excites me too. It's like, what do I think will work? And let's try it. I mean, art is an experiment. Yeah, sure, there are techniques you can use and there's rules to follow. There are. I mean, there's rules to art, but it's more of a technical guideline than it is you got to do it this way or it ain't right. So,
Before you reveal yours, I'll share mine as well. I have a drawer full of rocks. right next to me. And this is something I actually learned from Leah Wagner. She taught a class on doing stained glass and leather. So cool. Very, very cool. And one of the things I learned in her class was don't worry about your tools, just figure out what works, kind of to the point that you were talking about earlier, but not even what leathercraft tools do you have? What's the effect you're trying to get? And there's so many things that for backgrounding or texture or something that it's just these kind of rocks that have different rigid things. And she's funny. She could tell you where every rock in her collection came from, right? It's all actually kind of a memento of a trip that, there's a bit of a connection with those. Mine aren't that serious. I have a 7-year-old, so we got plenty of rocks that just we find in pockets. But I can't tell you how many times I've been trying to figure out what's going to get a particular effect of either weathering or aging or a little bit of backgrounding or just trying to get something a little different. I'm like, well, I got, that little chunk of concrete that fell off a curb and it happens to do a great job. But if you were to just walk in the shop and open a drawer, it probably seems like a junk collection. So what is yours? What is your odd tool?
Okay, so I'll pause. I'll go grab it. They're not as cool as either of yours, I would say. But let me go. I'm pause for. Let me go grab it real quick.
Dude, rocks.
Yeah, it's great.
That's freaking genius. I mean, it's honestly genius. You can guarantee that then one of the next few shields I make is going to have rocks.
Well, and you can kind of like every rock, you just kind of rotate it at different angles and stuff.
I lit up when dude, that is honestly genius.
Oh man, when she taught her class, it was like rocks and forks and all kinds of stuff. Like the whole point was just used found items. But
So before I share about just hearing both of you talk, I point out some things that I learned from Jim. We talked about Jim Linnell earlier, but you go to Jim's class, cost of admission is worth the stories you're going to hear while you're there. But he's got tons of tools. I got all these tools and stuff out here. But when you talk about the master leather craftsmen out there, how they don't have all the crap. They've gone through this evolution where they've had some tools they've earned and they've collected tools, and they go to this phase where they get rid of everything, and they show up with a Folgers can of a couple of tools they've been collecting over the years, like literally a can. You go to Jim shop, he has thousands of tools. I've got 50, 60 tools out there that I don't even deserve to have for the most part, right? Because I can't use them. But master craftsman shows up with just a few things and he creates art out of that. He just gets right to the point. And I think that's useful. Another thing, Justin, you've said several times, which I'm taking away from this conversation for me, is knowing what my tools will do, knowing what I can do, and then working backwards from there. I don't know how many times I've done some work in the computer because I'm very proficient on the computer doing my design work there. And I get it to leather. I'm like, my knife didn't go that small. My skill doesn't allow for that detail. Why did I put myself in that corner? And I think it's an opportunity for obviously stretching yourselves to do better, but also this opportunity to say, well, what can you do? What do your tools do? I mean, I do that in other areas, but not necessarily with my tooling work. So that's a good reminder for me. Okay, so I asked the question. I didn't realize I was going to actually present my weird thing here.
show and tell.
This is probably the weirdest thing I have in my shop. Any clue what that is? Now, granted, these are pretty old. We've had these are in place for 3 or 4 years.
Drying racks?
Well, what'd you say?
Are we drying stuff? Drying racks?
I like the way you think because this is actually something people with cats put on their furniture to keep the cats off the stuff.
Oh man, okay.
I don't have a cat, never will have a cat. I was walking through a 99-cent store once. I don't even know why. I saw this rack of these things. I was like, And so this is what we usually use for edge drying. We paint things, they have a lot of edge drying. We put it all in here. We just stand it up straight. There's no fancy magnets and no clamps and all that kind of stuff. You just drop it in there and we paint. I mean, these things are covered in paint and crud. I've probably had 6 or 7 of them and we're probably down to the last 4 at this point. But when we're really going through wallets and stuff, we throw these things on a table and we use them as little drying racks for all of our edge paint. Weirdest thing. And every time someone comes in here, they ask, what is that fancy thing? Like, no. You don't understand. This is just $4 worth of anti-cat mats for somebody's furniture that we're using for edge paint. So weirdest thing in my shop, but it works. It doesn't have to be some $20, $30 tool from some fancy leather shop. It could just be something you find out there in the world and apply it differently, which is art. I mean, that's how we get things done.
What a fantastic topic. How fascinating.
We poll a lot of other leather crafters that ask them that question. We probably learn a lot.
Yeah.
To kind of wrap us up, is there anything that you want to share? You were very prepared. You were more prepared than we were this evening. Do you have anything in your notes that you were excited to talk about that we never got around to that you just thought was, something that you thought would have value to share with the audience? Because you've told us you're a listener as well, which thank you for listening.
Yeah.
But so you kind of you know the vibe, you know what kinds of things we share. Is there anything that was on your list that we never got around to that you thought might have value to share with others?
I hope that people that currently exist in the industry can hold on to the idea that we are ultimately creatives, and to leave that net. I keep referring back to fishing with the biggest net possible, to leave that net wide open for ideas. Not that I haven't seen anybody to the contrary like fall into a box necessarily. That's what excites me the most, is the idea that we can make our own little worlds in our shops. And it sounds kind of crazy, but like this is my place where I make things. And when you walk in the door, there aren't any rules on what you have to do, on what you must do. It's a matter of what you want it to look like and how you meet that end result. That should, in a way, be inviting to people that want to get into the industry, or are looking like I once was not long ago. I mean, we started our business officially in 2019, and it was just kind of a hobby before then. But like, it should be a beautiful, warm, welcoming invitation that ultimately the medium is leather, and what you decide to do with it is what you want to do with it. And however that is in its final form is from your own vision. And that's the thing that I really am pushing for. It's what I tell my guys in the shop. Jamie has a good idea. I say, yeah, man, go with it. Like, you think that'll work? Go for it. Kyle has a great idea. You know what I was thinking about? Really, I love that part. Please tell me, because that is exciting. It's an exciting space. And you guys have a really exciting opportunity to have multiple conversations with people and spread those same ideas. I've listened to every single episode. It's exciting to hear other people have conversations about the things that I like. So roll with it. Let's keep pushing the ideas. Keep leaving that wide open. Keep introducing people to the craft and expanding this industry. It's a lost trade, as Don Gonzalez's podcast is named. It's something that is old time in tradition, but it can be expanded upon. There can be greater ideas introduced. I get fired up about that. So that's my statement. Let's keep the ideas flowing. Let's fish with the biggest net. Let's be super creative about it.
I won't try to step on that at all, but I will ask you, hey, how can we find you? Where can we follow you at? Where can we learn more about what you're doing day to day?
Thanks. Yeah. Fitzwater Leather. FITZ Water. Leather on all the platforms. Not on YouTube quite yet, but that's something we're working on. Just got to figure out how to use some of the equipment I have. We'll go from there. Otherwise, Fitzwater Leather, Instagram, Facebook. Shoot me a message.
Thank you so much, man. This has been great. You're somebody I've been following for a long time. Great talking to you. Great getting to know you. Really appreciate you joining us today and sharing some of your words and your wisdom with us, man. Thank you.
Jeez, no worries. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Beyond the Workbench. You can reach us on social platforms at Beyond the Workbench on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Also check out beyondtheworkbench.com and listen to more episodes on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts.